Bella Vista. It's JB Portillo here.
And Kristy Snyder.
And I'm so excited today because we have two really cool guests with us.
Yeah, this took a minor undertaking to pull this together, and I'm really excited that we get to offer this to the community.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do is, this is the first in a series. We're going to help Bella Vista understand Bella Vista. Maybe. But Bella Vista is governed by what we call the three-legged stool. And at some point today, I would like to point out the stool to you, courtesy of Linda Lloyd, who built this for us. And you can actually see that it is a three-legged stool. Today, we're going to talk about Cooper and the ACC, which is under Cooper, and POA. So, who's your guest today?
My guest today is Neff Nazor, I'm sorry. He's an old fellow Pennsylvanian. And he is the Senior Vice President of Cooper Communities. Welcome. And I personally want to thank you for being on the show. I think people really need to understand that Cooper is actually for Bella Vista. And my question to you is, how is Cooper Communities associated with the ACC in Bella Vista?
Well, under the declaration of Bella Vista, the developer, which is Cooper, was required to appoint the committee, the ACC committee, in the 90s, and they did so for many years. In the 90s, early 90s, there was a corporation constituted to be the Bella Vista Village Architectural Control Committee Incorporated. Mm-hmm. Cooper, the board of Cooper no longer appoints the committee, it appoints the board of the ACC Corporation, who in turn appoints the committee. And that's basically the only role Cooper plays in the ACC.
Okay, so there's a big miscommunication with people in the community as to Cooper's actual involvement in the day-to-day operation of Bella Vista. And what I really want people to know is that you actually volunteered for the TV station at one point.
Well, in my career at Cooper, I ran the cable companies. And back in the 80s, they were starting the Community Television Association, and they had a trailer, a camera, and a big wire that went up to the cable company head end.
Okay.
So 2 or 3 times a week, the technician would go up and flip a switch, and they'd be live on the air right then, right there.
So how long were you volunteering? How long were you working with the TV studio?
At that time, it was a company called CATV, which was constituted to supply television to the townhouses.
Okay.
Because antennas weren't permitted on the townhouse property, so they had to come up with a way to provide that kind of entertainment. So they constituted a cable company, both in all 3 villages at the time: Cherokee Village, Bella Vista Village, and Hot Springs Village. And at one time, I ran those for the company.
Okay, cool. And then explain the significance of Cooper to this very building that we're in right now.
Well, it used to be Cooper's headquarters.
There you go.
I had an office right upstairs.
So Cooper is involved in Bella Vista Community TV.
Let's bring on our next guest because we want to have a conversation between the 4 of us, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so many of you know Tom Judson, the COO of the POA, or the Property Owners Association, okay? And you guys fit together somehow. You're part of each other in many ways, part of those three-legged stool. So can you give us an idea of, the cliff notes of how you fit in?
So the POA, we manage all the recreational facilities. So 7 lakes, 7 golf courses, the tennis courts, all the parks, and many of the restaurants. Not all of them, but many of the restaurants. So in the gym facilities, and I'm missing a whole slew of other things, the beach, the pools, everything.
And the water.
And the water.
That's right.
And the water. So we have a rather large staff. At peak season, we have 450 employees because we have, the water utility, as you indicated. We have a lot of buildings that need to be maintained. Lake rangers, lifeguards, everything.
Gotcha. So, Neff, before all this happened in today's world, how was it back in the day?
Well, the Property Owners Association was developed when the Bella Vista started, after lessons learned in Cherokee Village, did not have a POA. The amenities were owned by the developer, and that's how the ACC came about. The houses that were built by builders with no plan, no aesthetic regulations or anything of that nature. So the declaration was written, and the developer turned all the amenities that it built and all the common property over to the owners through the POA. Other than writing it and being the first members of the board of the POA, which at that time there wasn't anybody else to be on the board, Cooper really didn't have much of a role in the operation of the POA. In later years, since development is no longer a priority, the only thing that we really deal with is communications, interpretation of what the declaration, how it was constituted, why it was constituted, and the ACC, which is required under the declaration for its committeemen to be appointed by the developer. The reason the ACC was included in this declaration is that when we first came to Benton County, there wasn't an inspection system in the county for houses. The concept was a earth tone kind of using nature as the backdrop, and that's why some of the regulations exist. In the early days, there wasn't anybody to inspect plumbing or electrical or engineering, and the ACC had to take on those roles too. But as soon as the city incorporated, it was able to get out of that responsibility.
Gotcha. So Tom, the declarations govern a lot of what you have to do as well, or what the POA is all about.
Correct.
How do the declarations, you go to those frequently, don't you? Because they're your governing body.
Correct, and they dictate what we can and what we can't do, where our authority starts and stops.
Gotcha.
So that's important, and all this information is available on the POA's website. And then in addition to that, you have the bylaws and the policies. So you get the declaration and you get more and more specific, 30,000 feet with the declaration, and then the bylaws, and then you get real and tight with the policies, which are much more specific.
Gotcha.
And so those are what govern the POA and our actions and so forth. We have some interaction with Cooper. We have a good partnership with Cooper. I meet with representatives from Cooper on a somewhat regular basis because we're all part of that same three-legged stool. So if you knock out one of the legs, you got a problem.
You do.
Right.
We've tried to put that thing together a while ago, and I know exactly what you mean.
Doesn't stand with just two.
No, it doesn't. You know what, before we get totally started, and we'll show it again, we have a graphic that I would like the audience to see, if we can get a camera over there in a minute, because it gives, was from the POA's website. I think it's on the city's website, and I think it's on the ACC's website. But it actually shows in a nice little graphic what each of the three entities does. And it's going to come up here any second because I can see it. But you're right. Anybody new to the community, or even if you've been here forever, you can always go to any of those three websites and get the same information. Okay, so on the screen now, we're seeing exactly what the Architectural Control Committee is for. Now, these are bullets, so it's not down to the gory detail, but thank you guys, whoever thought of publishing this. I think it was probably the POA.
Well, it actually came when I first got here, and I was the new one.
Yeah.
And I was confused.
Yeah.
And so I started speaking with the city, and our marketing department for the POA put this together jointly with everybody, and it's on everybody's website, because we're trying to, most communities have just the city, and they do the parks and the water utilities, and ours is a different community. And different isn't bad, it's just different.
That's exactly right.
So
That's
we try and help them out, but it's an ongoing process. Our member services office receives about 40,000 calls per year, and half of those have nothing to do with the POA.
Can you, just off the top of your head, can you think of something like a call you might get that you would know instantly to turn over to the ACC?
It's usually maybe it's a new building permit or something of that nature. Maybe they want to repaint their home. Maybe they want to build a fence or something of that nature. So we have a good relationship with both the city and the ACC. So when we receive those, 20 some odd thousand calls, we are still committed to customer service, and we provide the caller with the telephone number. This is who you're going to call, and so forth. So it makes it very helpful, so that they're not trying to chase around and figure out who they need to call. We're going to help them out.
Exactly. And this week, or this section of the series, we're talking just with the ACC and the POA. Next month, you'll be back.
You're bringing me back?
I'm bringing you back. And the mayor will be here, so we'll see the other part. It was just too much information at one point.
Right.
And Neff, you can come back anytime you want.
Thank you.
But okay, now, I understand, just from being a citizen here, that there's certain permits. Could we bring up the ACC band again on there and talk about some of those permits have to do with the ACC, but you also have a permit with the city. So I understand that in the ACC's office, because I went and looked after we talked, that there's a sign there that says, here's what you need to come here for. And by the way, you need to go next door to the Community Development Center, which is part of the city, for a different permit. So I think in both locations, I understand?
I don't know the signage that they may have.
Yeah.
It's a good idea to direct residents and members to the different locations. Not everybody comes under the ACC. Property that is not under the declaration is not governed by the ACC rules and regulations.
Tell us a little more about that. Like you have development out there, you have...
Well, when the property that was brought under the declaration, which was Bella Vista, and that's what Bella Vista POA, they have the same issue. Not all property is under the POA.
Right.
Because the incorporated limits of Bella Vista are wider than just the original declaration property.
Wow.
I know. It just gets more...
So about 95% of the POA's borders and the city borders are the same. But you still have, as Neff indicated, you have portions of our community that are in the POA but not in the city, and some are in the city and not in the POA.
And then, to confuse efforts even more, on the Planning Commission, the planning even reaches out somewhere in the county. And I'm like, we're not in Bella Vista anymore. Why are we talking about this?
Right.
So I would someday, for Christmas maybe, I'd love to see a map with a 3-layer section where you have Bella Vista and then you have the city piece. Then you have I'd love.
Does that exist?
I don't think so.
Well, the records exist. The original declaration, or the original incorporation, took the outside boundaries of the subdivisions and tied them all together into a big plot of land. And that's what was incorporated.
Gotcha.
But within that plot are donut holes that are not part of the declaration, not under the declaration. Reserved property, there's some owners, out parcels that are on there. The famous burning stump dump was not under the declaration, I don't believe, at the time, when it was a Walker, and then over the years it changed hands. The developer is the only entity that can bring property under the declaration. Now, the city has expanded somewhat outside of its original boundaries, and none of that property is under the declaration.
Okay, I have a specific question. The gun range. Okay, that's not
So that's in county, it's not in city.
right, but it's POA.
Yes, it is.
It's plain.
But it's not under the declaration, I don't think. It's an amenity that you operate.
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
It is technically an out parcel.
Gotcha.
And the developer deeded to either the POA or to the gun club at the time, I'm not sure exactly how it went, the property that they're utilizing. The property surrounding that is still owned by Cooper.
Right.
Gotcha.
But it is an amenity that they operate.
Okay.
And which is a good idea.
So at any time, if you developed or you some of the Cooper land and you decided to sell it, would it ever come under the POA?
Depends. Probably. We're developing property that along Forest Hills Boulevard that is currently not under the declaration, that will be under the declaration when it is permitted and sales begin.
Okay, okay. All right, so later.
Yeah,
The POA will get assessments and
Okay.
continue to grow.
Yeah, that's how we grow. Wow. Neff, do you ever get any, well, at your level, you probably don't get some of these daily calls, or maybe your office does.
no, since we really don't operate the day-to-day activities of the ACC, they typically call the ACC for guidance or get on the website. They sometimes will call the POA and or the city and try to get guidance. It's an interesting issue to have when the city is not able to regulate aesthetics, really.
Okay.
They've never wanted to. I'm not sure they can. And therefore, there's no way for the declaration to extinguish that responsibility without a vote of 66% to change it. So the ACC, as the POA, is here to stay for many, many years. The idea is how to work in conjunction with one another. The aesthetics, there's some rules that are specifically noted in the declaration, such as fences and signage and things of that nature that have to be regulated and permitted. Paint, people don't think, well, why do I have to get a permit to paint my house? Well, there's restrictions on the types of colors you can use. And if you don't get a permit, then someone with the knowledge of what those colors are can't advise you on what color to paint your house. So you get some odd colors when people don't go to get their permits.
But hopefully what happens when somebody buys property in Bella Vista, the real estate agents, or there are some sorts of things they sign. I saw some sort of form in here that declares that those things need to happen. So I'm hoping and I believe that most real estate people give an idea of how everything works. You know, a lot of people sign things like that and then they're very surprised.
Yeah.
I'd
So when you're buying a house, you got to sign that much paperwork, and you get going and you sign and sign and sign. So I think there's paperwork in the closing documents, whether they're reading it. But once they get to the member services,
Yes.
we spend a lot of time. Our member services staff spends a lot of time with the new resident, going over those things and trying to educate them as much as possible.
And I know you and the mayor periodically have meetings of new folks.
Each quarter we have a new residents meeting, and the mayor and I host that. It's actually put on by a volunteer group, and we're the guest speakers, and we field a lot of questions, and we're trying from the very beginning to get everybody to understand the difference between the three entities.
Gotcha. Okay, I'm going to ask you a hard question. And just be honest. Do you ever see the ACC becoming a part of the city or the POA?
No. Well, maybe the POA. The problem is that the declaration requires certain things that the city is either not able to perform legally or realistically that are not going away. They're in the declaration, so they have to remain. The other problem is that when you read through it and chase it all the way back, the developer is in fact responsible for the appointment of the commissioner or the committeeman of the ACC. And unless the entity that takes on that responsibility is willing to provide indemnification against decisions that are made downstream, the developer is not likely to give that up. He would probably like to, but how you get the indemnification that's a tricky thing to work through.
When you say the developer, does that mean Cooper?
There's only one developer. in Bella
Okay,
Vista
okay, just
Yeah.
clarification.
At this point.
Yeah,
It's assignable. There could be another one at some point in time. It probably would be assignable if another company came in and wanted to be the developer and acquired the assets. But at this point, there's only one.
okay, okay. How do you get on the board of the ACC?
The committee that put in an application or request. I don't know that there's any vacancies. Usually, there's a member of the POA management. There used to be a member of the city, not right now, but the ACC, the board thought it was important to have a member of each member of the three legs on it. This time, I don't believe the city has a member. And then outside residents or builders or real estate brokers, people that are familiar with building.
Gotcha, so there's some criteria.
Again, like I said, since we don't operate it, I can't tell you
Yeah.
who all is on it, but anybody that's interested in serving, turn in a resume because it's when somebody vacates a position, it's usually a search.
Gotcha,
They don't really have much of a list to go by.
gotcha. Okay, I'm going to ask you kind of a weird question, and there probably isn't any answer to this, but Tom will relate to this immediately. When Tom first came to town, we had him in here and we interviewed him. You remember what I asked you?
You asked me about chickens.
I did. I asked him about chickens. And I was looking through the because I didn't know either. All I know is that in the declaration, or that part of it, that there is a piece in there about livestock. You can have dogs and cats and things like that, but not chickens.
Fish and turtles.
Fish and turtles, yeah. And then I looked on the city's ordinances, and they conflict. So,
The city permits certain farm-type animals on property that is not under the declaration.
okay, there's the
That's
key.
the- That's
Declaration
distinction.
controls the property under the declaration.
So somebody in the city could have chickens and no rooster, but I can't put those in my backyard.
Correct. Neff referenced earlier, if you look at a map of Bella Vista,
Yes.
Neff said there's certain donuts. A portion in the very center of our community is not part of the POA, but it is in the city. There's a lot of farmland in those sections. So in on those farmlands, which is not part of the POA, not falling under the declaration, you can have chickens. But you can be right next door,
Right.
and then you're in a housing development that is part of the POA, is part and falls under the declaration, and in that case, in that area, you can't have a chicken.
And I know it's complicated, and I know there are rules, but people in the city of Austin, Texas have chickens in their backyard. They don't have roosters because that's the troublemaker, obviously, that crows in the morning. But I don't know. Someday I'd like to have a chicken in my backyard.
Your neighbor may not want you to have a chicken in your backyard.
Yeah.
Anyway, those are the kind of things that come up. There are still conflicts between
There
all
are.
three.
There are. Under the declaration, the signage restrictions are pretty restrictive. The city has a much more lenient one. It's been, if I was writing the declaration today, I would not write it the same way.
You
Right.
wouldn't?
No, there's some things, the ability to change it it's constitutional.
Yeah.
It's basically, you have to have 66% of the owners, not the voting owners, all the owners in good standing to change it. That's a little, on some things, that's a little tough. But in 1963 and 64, when it was being written, there wasn't any go-bys in this country.
Right.
There wasn't any communities of this size with these kinds of regulations. And the lawyers at Cooper spent a lot of time researching what to do and how to do it. And they erred on the side of being too conservative, and restrictive would be another word to say it. And today we find ourselves in a situation where they can't be changed easily, and some would say it not at all.
Because it's not just the 66%. So we have approximately 39,000 lots. So you have to get 26,000 to vote to get to the 66%, but they all must vote for yes.
You have to have
So
a
it's
quorum and
not
you have to have
just-
the vote.
Yeah.
It's not just participation at 66%, it's yes votes must be.
Gotcha.
And so that's 26,000 yeses. When we struggle for an election, for an assessment increase, we'll get 21,000 to participate. So,
And they got yeses and nos.
and they got yeses and nos. So it's near impossible to change the declaration, unfortunately.
The later declarations after Hot Springs Village were that the ACC was actually under the POA,
Gotcha.
and they could make rules and regulations based on what the members wanted, the majority of the members, because they could make their own regulations. So it was not written the same way. There's also easier ways to change it. There's easier ways to raise assessments. Most of them after Hot Springs Village was 5% of the CPI, whichever is greater. And those villages are seeing, with less amenities, paying upwards of $100 a month for lots and homes, whichever. Now they are much smaller communities, so the people that live there are much a higher percentage of the lots, the lot occupancy. So
On Monday of this week, in Hot Spring Village, the assessment increase campaign was successful.
Was it?
Yeah, and so they're going with $90 a month the first year, then 100, then 110. They're stepping it up over a 3-year period.
So we've got a really good deal here at like $37.
Outstanding
Yeah.
deal.
Cooper has voted in favor of every assessment increase that's ever, because we think it's important to get it up to where it is reasonable for what the amenities provide. The fee structures, and Tom can address this, but the fee structures and stuff exist the way they do because the assessment is so low. There would be less fees and less of that type of thing if the assessment was more reasonable to the amenities.
So you just said Cooper voted as well, so can you explain that part?
So anytime there is a vote, there are Class A votes and Class B votes. And correct me, I think Cooper has the Class B or the Class
Cooper's,
A.
Class B is lots that are platted but never sold.
Okay,
Class A lots are lots that have been sold. No matter who owns them, there's an assessment attached to a Class A lot. A Class B lot, the assessment does not attach until it's sold the first time. And so you have to have both classes at the same percentage approve declaration changes and things of that nature.
gotcha.
And like I said, Cooper has voted both its A's and B's in favor of every assessment that I can remember in Bella Vista, and probably in every village.
Thank you for that.
Well, and
That's
we paid
important.
more, and at one time, we paid more assessments than anybody else. But that's changed over the years.
Yeah.
And could you briefly explain that you told me that a third of Bella Vista's 35,000 acres is green space?
The master plan of Bella Vista, which began in '66, about a third of all the acreage within the boundaries of the declared property are green spaces. Either golf courses, clubhouses, common property behind your home. I don't know in a regular house subdivision, lot subdivision, that there is any lot that doesn't have at least the back of it in the green space. So you're not backed up to your neighbor. Now some of that has to do with terrain, no
Right.
question. But some of it has to do with the plan, the original plan. Our engineers in the beginning were really concentrating on trying to carve a community out of the nature and not force nature away out of the equation. So,
I think that's amazing.
well, it was a goal. 60 years ago, things have changed, and but that was the original plan. And when we wrote it down, we couldn't change it. We didn't change it. We wouldn't change it.
I don't think I shouldn't say there isn't, because I'm sure there is at least one,
Probably.
but I have personally never seen a lot that does not border common property. Now, sometimes the common property is really narrow and really small, but I have not seen a single lot that is not bordered by common property. In most cases, you have really large stretches of common property between, because as Neff indicated, you have terrain.
Yeah.
You go down to the ravine, and so the house on the other side.
I think we
is-
call them hollers here.
Sure.
Okay.
Ridges and mountains.
Yep.
I don't think I can say that. It just
Okay, I
doesn't
know
come
you
out
can't.
right.
Yeah, I know, it's a ravine, I
Well,
got
and, obviously, if you're a trail aficionado, a lot of the trails are built on the common properties between the platted subdivisions down in property that was not being used by the members. The members can use common property, but there was nothing there. I mean, if you wanted to go to your neighbor across the hollow, you had to go down the hill and up the hill.
There you go, there you go.
Yeah.
Because it's very unusual, to think about, to come into an established community and put in 100 miles of trails.
Yes.
My brother-in-law lived in a community in Georgia that had trails everywhere, but it was planned in advance. Everything was planned in advance. But this is being added 50 years after the fact. It's pretty amazing, and it's because of all the
Common
haulers.
Hollers, oh, you
Yeah.
said it, I'm
There's
so
only
proud of you.
there's a handful of owners, landowners, that have to be involved in the trail system instead of every home site. or
Thank you for
every
that,
home.
too.
Well,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Cooper has a lot, and the POA, obviously, with the common property, has a lot, and there's some others that are stakeholders in that effort. The city has property that it's put trails on, so.
Well, you know what, I think we're almost out of time. Is there
Right.
anything else you'd kind of like to say, either of you, about today, or that we need to let Bella Vista know about?
I think we've covered most of it that I can
Okay.
think of.
I think we have one of the best communities in the entire United States.
I think we do, and it's the
Yeah.
largest of its kind, for sure.
From founding to where we are today, I mean, the vision that was there from the very beginning to create what we have now is just outstanding.
And that's what we're trying to get across here, Bella Vista. We want you to understand, even though it's so confusing, we're going to do our best over
Yeah.
the next few sessions.
Very important to avoid conflict if it's
It
necessary.
is, it is. And so thanks to both of you for being here today. I'll see you next month, because you and the mayor are going to do part 2. You can come back if you want.
I'll let the mayor and Tom, they deal, I mean, they have a relationship that is constant.
Yes.
And affect basically the same people. Our constituency are folks that we've already sold the property to for
Right.
the most part. And while we do have some responsibilities left over, it's mostly working with the city and the POA that handles that.
Yes.
Well,
Well,
that's
thanks
beautiful.
again, both of you.
Thank you.
Bella Vista, please go to any of the 3 websites, but the POA one is really easy to get to, and look at the chart yourself, the one we pulled up today. I know that will help you in the beginning. There's another section of that actually below the actual picture of the 3 entities, where it's, do I need a permit? And where to go to. So
Right.
there's that too. So our job is to help educate Bella Vista.
That's right.
And boy, are we learning stuff.
Wow, it's crazy.
That's right. So thank you. We'll see you next month. This is JB Portillo with Bella Vista Community Television.
And Kristy Snyder.
This has been a presentation of Bella Vista Community Television Association. You may find this program on youtube.com by going to Bella Vista Community Television. Thank you for joining us.